Welcome to our program, Colonel Sweet and Mark Toth.
Hey, Daniel, thanks for having us back on the show.
Hey, Daniel, great to be here. Thank you.
Ukraine has destroyed 20% of Russia's oil refining capacity, according to the White House's estimates. Reuters reported about the 17% of destroyed Russia's oil refining capacity. Colonel Sweet, what is your assessment of this Ukrainian strategy way of waging war inside Russia?
Yeah, it's certainly a different take on sanctions, isn't it? The kinetic take on sanctions has been very effective. And like you said, anywhere between 20 and 21% is affecting Russia's ability to finance their war. So much to the point that you see President Putin today in China at the Shangri-La Security Symposium, actually working with 20 other Western countries, trying to solicit more support in the form of money, oil sales, and exchanges of technology in order to sustain this war. So it's been quite effective, and it's also done a number to the air defense system that supports the defenses of Russia. They've opened numerous air corridors, and with the introduction now of the Flamingo missile, and then also the modified Neptune missile, I think we're going to see more strikes deeper into the Russian heartland.
And Mark, what is your assessment of the political implications of these new strikes on the Russian territory? Because there are lots of fuel shortage across Russia, also in the far east regions of the Russian Federation.
Daniel, clearly, speaking as a former economist, when you take out 17 to 18% of a country's fuel capacity, that has implications not just on the battlefield in Ukraine, but across. Obviously, it's going to be consumers that pay the price first. Russia is in a war economy. They're in a war footing, and they're going to prioritize getting gas and energy to their military assets. But that said, production involves oil. Consumers need oil. All of those things, it's going to hurt. I think the bigger reaction, though, unfortunately, is that Putin's going to be able to control that. He still controls the domestic situation inside of Russia. I think the bigger issue is any kind of political pressure that it creates for Ukraine on the outside. I mean, we already saw Hungary protesting a lot. You've got Fico in Slovakia basically doing the same thing. Don't touch our Russian oil and gas energy supplies and the like. And so from a political standpoint, I suspect that's what Ukraine is going to face the most. Now, my advice to President Zelensky is ignore it. Look, the objective here is to either win this war by expelling all Russian troops out of Ukraine, or at least to win it economically so that Putin's cost calculus, as John likes to say, changes. And so from that standpoint, Ukraine needs to keep going after all the oil and energy infrastructure that they can inside of Russia, and I applaud them for doing so.
Colonel Sweet, why is it so hard for the Russian side to protect these oil refineries from the Ukrainian drone attacks? Because of the large Russia's territory, big size of Russia's territory, or because of the lack of air defense systems, because most of them are involved in the war against Ukraine or in protecting Vladimir Putin's bunker and his residence, the Kremlin?
All the above, Daniel. Look, the Ukraine's been very effective in taking out Russian radar systems, been very effective in taking out their air defense systems. And it's forced President Putin to make decisions on where he places those assets. Now, he's been placing those assets, like you said, around his own compounds for his own protection, but he's also been pushing them forward into Crimea to protect assets there also. But it comes down to, once again, Ukrainian innovation. Ukraine can find these weapon systems, take out the associated radars, and by doing so, they're opening up air corridors into and out of Russia that they're exploiting almost at will. Now, look, Russia is taking out some of the missiles and drones as they come into the country, but Russia, it certainly isn't in a position to take them all out. And Ukraine's been very effective in what they're targeting. I mean, it's not just oil refineries. They're also going after weapons storage facilities, and they're also going after those locations where the drones that they manufacture are being assembled. So they've been very effective in targeting those, and I suspect they will continue with the latest batch of missiles that they have now available from their own production facilities there in Ukraine.
You just mentioned about deep strikes inside Russia. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has announced new deep strikes inside the Russian territory as the Flamingo missile is getting ready to be used against the Russian targets and is already being used to strike deep inside Russia. How do you see the main challenges of using these cruise missiles against Russia's territory? I mean, in penetrating Russia's air defense system. And do you feel that the new package from the US regarding these new missiles for the Ukrainian fighter jets, Soviet-era fighter jets, could also play a significant role in that?
It could and it will. Look, Ukraine's playing to their strength right now. Their strength right now is internal production of drones and ballistic missile systems, and also playing to their strength of successfully taking out key targets within Russia. They have a plan, and the plan, quite frankly, is to bleed Russia dry. They're having what they can as far as stopping the Russian ground force. So they've been very good at blocking them and slowing their advances. They know they're not going to be able to physically remove them from the country. So they're doing the next best thing, which is attacking Russia's ability to finance the war. And yes, the additional missile systems that are coming in from the United States are not likely to be targeting Russian deep targets. They're more likely to be more involved in the interdiction of Russian forces within or along the borders or just on the other side of the border. So interdiction still is key in order to stop the flow of Russian soldiers into the country. But those deep strikes at the end of the day is what's going to bring Russia to its knees in their inability to continue to wage war.
Let's cover also the result of Russia's summer campaign in Ukraine. Recently, General Gerasimov has conducted this briefing with his colleagues, and he has overstated the gains of the Russian army, presenting so-called fake maps with the territory which has not yet been seized by the Russian side. This territory has been presented as the Russian territory, Russian control territory. What is your take on that, Colonel Svit?
I'm not sure it's a fake map. I'm sure it's Russian intent. And I'm sure that General Gerasimov is showing his hand because he just most recently said that they're going to continue their assaults. It's the danger here is that if Russia is able to enclose Ukraine by successfully seizing Odessa and the port, that they'd be able to have Moldova in their sights next. And I think that's quite dangerous also for Europe. So no, let's just remember that Gerasimov, a failed ground commander who was relieved and is now back in the Kremlin, believes in one principle, and that principle is mass in the form of artillery and mass in the form of infantry.
Mark, and what is your take on the political message the Kremlin was sending by organizing this open briefing with Russian General Gerasimov and publishing this post on social media of the Russia's defense ministry demonstrating this map with Ukraine, Russia, and some mispresented situation on the ground?
Daniel, I think it's twofold. The first being everything that John just covered. Russia intends to, at some point, take all of the Black Sea ports away from Ukraine and then threaten that to get into Moldova. That's something that John and I wrote about in the early months of the war. Watch out for Moldova, and we've been warning about that ever since. The second continues to be messaging on a global scale, and especially directed at the European Union. I think more so than just Trump himself. It's basically saying, we want you to see this map. We want you to see our intentions. We keep telling you at every single level. And Lavrov did that. The foreign minister of Russia has been saying repeatedly that our maximalist demands remain. Nothing has changed. We're going to get what we want. And we're not going to concede anything less. And now you've got Gerasimov basically saying the same thing by presenting that map behind himself, which shows the Odessa Oblast, of which Russia controls 0, and the Kharkiv Oblast as well to the north, of which they only control about 4% of that territory, is basically saying that's in our eyes as well. Now, the unspoken reality, too, is they want the rest of Ukraine one way or the other. And if they can indeed get control of all of the Black Sea coastline, they're going to strangle in many ways Ukraine economically, because that's a vital ports that are needed for grain exports, et cetera, that are a key part of your economy. Obviously, there'd be real alternatives going into the EU, et cetera. But my own takeaway is, though, that this is all about messaging to the EU. And I think why we say that, why we think that, is look, just what happened to Ursula von der Leyen's plane as it was trying to land in Bulgaria. It was jammed by Russian GPS stuff. They were literally trying to down, or at least interfere with the safe landing of the president of the European Commission. So there's a lot of messaging going on here. And now it's just the military itself chiming in that basically correlates with what Putin has told us in the beginning. It correlates with what Lavrov keeps saying. It correlates with what the Russian media keeps disseminating from Moscow. And now you've got Gerasimov himself saying it. We need to listen. They intend to take it all.
Let's cover also this debate on security guarantees for Ukraine. There have been lots of publication by Politico and Financial Times about the possibility of deploying peacekeeping forces to Ukraine and also of deploying the third country neutral force to Ukraine to patrol the so-called demilitarized zone. Financial Times suggested that Trump also was considering deploying Chinese troops to Ukraine. Colonel Sweet, what is your assessment of the current stage of this big debate on security guarantees to Ukraine? And is the US ready to go all in and to seriously provide Ukraine with strong backstop to support, to back these European troops on the ground?
That's a great question. Mark and I wrote an article in the Hill, a Washington publication, entitled NATO's Article 5-like fallacy in Ukraine. And it's just that. It's a fallacy. It's the only way you're going to have any type of security guarantee for Ukraine, one of two ways. One is admission into NATO, which we already know that many NATO countries, several NATO countries are against that at the moment. The other security guarantee is boots on the ground. And the only way you have, the only way you're going to deter Russia from attacking further into Ukraine is to put some sort of boots on the ground, whether they're European or American. But it has to be a force on the ground that makes Putin make a decision whether or not he's going to attack NATO forces, which is what he does not want to do, which is why he is so adamant against those ground forces being there. Okay, I think the thought of possibly putting Chinese forces in a demilitarized zone is ridiculous. Europe's never going to support that. I mean, that's just an extension of Russia. I mean, just look where Putin is today. Okay, he's in China. Okay, so that's a terrible decision. And you got a number now of European countries that are now expressing their reluctance to put boots on the ground. So a contracted force, a Chinese force, no forces. The only security guarantee in my mind is to physically have boots on the ground, and they have to be in Ukraine. They can't be along the border. It says the prime minister from Italy made mention to a force that could react within 24 hours. I doubt any force is going to react within 24 hours to come inside Ukraine. If they're already in Ukraine, they have to fight back. If they're outside Ukraine, you have national governments making decisions after the fact. It's a movement to contact, not a defense. It is not a good situation. So, no, boots on the ground is the only solution.
Also, The Telegraph reported that President Trump was considering deploying American private contractors to Ukraine as so-called in form of boots on the ground to deter Russia, prevent Russia from attacking Ukraine again. Would this be a good idea from your perspective, Colonel Sweet?
Well, I think it falls into the same scenario of the United States providing weapons to Ukraine. If the weapons are killing Russians, then the Russians have a problem with it. If the U.S. is financing a private workforce, like a Blackwater, to go in and provide security, it's still American. It's still American dollars. It's still American dollars used to deter a Russian force. And then, oh, by the way, what do you do when that force comes in contact? How are you going to evacuate casualties? It's going to be a U.S. effort, right? How are you going to evacuate, the dead? it doesn't change anything. Okay. You still have to have boots on the ground, and you still have to have some force, a sizable force that could come to their defense if Russia is to cross the border. So it briefs well. It's like, oh, we're not putting Americans at harm, but we are. Okay. And it's still, from a Russian perspective, it's a NATO funded force that's there, and they will adamantly reject it the same way the West will adamantly reject Chinese forces being in that security zone.
But do you feel that any kind of U.S. Private contractor military firm like Blackwater would be capable enough of deterring and fighting Russians on the ground in Ukraine?
Last time I checked, Blackwater doesn't have tanks. They don't have jets. They don't have HIMARS. They are a light infantry type force, possibly with armored vehicles. And oh, by the way, the last time Russia invaded Ukraine unsuccessfully was with 190,000 troops. If they're going to do it again, don't you think they would have learned their lesson, and they would come even heavier, 200, 300, 400,000 troops with associated hardware? No, look, Blackwater would be a speed bump at best.
And Mark, what is your take on this idea of American contractors deployed to Ukraine or any kind of other third countries' forces, like so-called neutral country forces?
Daniel, if you'll allow me, I need to kind of step back and answer this at higher altitude. I mean, I've got three kind of impressions here. One is that it's just premature. It's all predicated upon, when you look at the construct around what Trump is proposing, Ukraine giving up the fortress belt in the Donbass. That would be military suicide, in my opinion. We've talked about that before here with you. And that, to me, is a non-starter. So from that standpoint, if you want some kind of buffer zone, I'm highly supportive of what President Zelensky said. Let's make that buffer zone inside of Russia as opposed to a key fortress belt in the Donbass. So that's one thing. The second thing, though, is that this is a preliminary discussion. I mean, there's one big thing here that we're all missing, is that Ukraine has not yet brought Putin to the negotiating table through kinetic means, and that has to happen first. So we're talking about all these possibilities, this conjecture, if you will, of what something might look like yet, but there's still a war going on, a hot war that needs to have a change in its cost calculus from Putin's side, and that hasn't happened yet. So I think this is all a lot of talk about nothing, and not in a good way, not in a useful way. What we should be focused on is talking about what Ukraine needs to win. And then, you know, my third thought process here in terms of it, let's say you get to some form of this, and I agree with John, you know, PMCs from the U.S. would be like a speed bump. They're not advanced yet in the art of drone warfare, all the things that your fellow countrymen have been going through. They're not going to be able to stop that or stop a mechanized forces coming from Russia, et cetera. But the thing that nobody's thinking through that we've talked about before is this domino effect of, okay, what happens if a PMC from the U.S., a paramilitary force from the U.S. gets hit, or troops, or say an air shield from a European nation that's a member of NATO gets hit? Do you have a domino effect that suddenly triggers Article 5? So I think this is all messy. And as John and I wrote in The Hill, as he mentioned, this is just one big fallacy. Let's win this war first before we get to this. And by winning, I don't mean necessarily winning in the sense of defeating Russia inside of Russia, but meaning winning by the sense of expelling all Russian forces from Ukrainian sovereign territory, or at least doing so via the negotiating table.
And let's cover our final topic for today, is the recent sales of American weapons to Ukraine, or so future sales of weapons, which were green-lighted by the U.S. Department of State. Colonel Sweet, what is your assessment of this new package of weapons which are being sold to Ukraine, this maintenance packages to Patriot systems and some kind of missiles for Soviet-era fighter jets? Is it all enough to actually turn the tide of the war? And do you have any kind of positive attitude to this kind of sales of defensive weapons?
I think the sale of defensive weapons is a necessity. It's obviously something that has to be accomplished in the now. Okay, you have to stop the bleeding. We've written about this a number of times. You got to stop the bleeding first before you can take the fight, if you will, a ground type of fight to Russia. So I think that the weapon systems that are being provided and continue to be provided by the Trump administration, even though they are defensive in nature, are affording Ukraine the ability to slowly stop the number of forces that are coming into the country, like we spoke about, the interdiction phase. If they maintain the number of patriots, it will attrit the number of ballistic missiles that are fired at them and allow Ukraine to use their own munitions to do their own deep strikes. So I think it's a step in the right direction. But it does seem to be the mixed signals that come out of Washington. In one breath, the president saying, I want this to stop, right? All these people that are dying, but he's not putting the pressure on Putin, okay? The fighting stops when Putin stops attacking. It's not going to stop when Ukraine stops resisting. Okay, it has to be Putin, and the pressure is on the wrong person. It needs to be on Putin to get this to stop.
Also, U.S. Ambassador to NATO, Mr. Whitaker, says that President Trump is helping Ukraine to conduct more deeper strikes inside Russia by providing military aid. Is he right?
So the short answer is yes. The deeper strikes aren't necessarily deeper within the interior of Russia, but rather deeper on the other side of the border where troops are assembling, where their marshal areas are, where the weapons are, where the ammunition is being stored. He's not facilitating or he's not advancing the deep strikes. He is looking at the interdiction fight. And I think the weapons that are being provided right now assist in interdiction, but there has to be a time, I believe, that they take restrictions off of Ukraine and allow them to use the weapons in a manner that they see as the army that is defending their country, that they see is the best use of those weapon systems.
Thank you, Colonel Sweet and Mark Toth, for your time and for your support for Ukraine, and glory to Ukraine.
Hey, thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate it.